Young Posse is problematic, and it's not a harmless exception or a random outlier, but a deliberately orchestrated strategy by the company. By the end of this video, you'll know whether Young Posse deserve to be canceled, boycotted, or consigned to oblivion. The first controversy surrounding Young Posse manifested with their debut, Macaroni Cheese. Musically, it was extremely bold, yet structurally consistent. But music is subjective, and therefore does not require further discussion here. At the same time, the song crossed moral boundaries. Overtly sexualized references to underage members reveal the instrumentalizing logic behind the production. The performative excesses, absurd movements, and questionable choreography function not as mere artistic experiments, but as part of a strategically calculated provocation. At the time of release, one might have tolerated this from a liberal perspective, which I also did, but in retrospect, the full scope of the problem becomes clear. In the following 3 EPs, lyrical allusions continued to appear. I don't assign them too much weight. Even where they seem questionable, they can be interpreted as part of a canonical continuity within the group's production. In the Cold EP, there was even polemic, which, under deep analysis within the meta premise, could be positively affirmed, though this remains an exception. Afterward, 2 events further underscore the group's problematic nature. First, the release of their latest EP, Growing Pain, particularly the B-side track, Soju, which must be considered controversial due to its sexualized and age-inappropriate content. Second, the group's performance in Moscow, which raises concerns in the context of ongoing geopolitical tensions. While the song Cold from the latest EP contains a clearly critical negation on the meta level and can be analyzed positively from an artistic perspective, Soju is highly controversial in its overall conception. Regardless of the participation of underage members, the song remains problematic in its content. On the meta level, an ambivalent tension between negation and affirmation emerges. Although the negation premises could theoretically be analyzed, the sound design and overall presentation necessitate a critical examination, as the boundary between negation and affirmation is blurred and remains unclear even under deep analysis. To provide a better executed example, Billionaire by Baby Monster also exhibits an ambivalence between capitalist affirmation and negation. Here, the negation within the meta-premise is articulated more clearly and lyrically. The presentation is unmistakably a performative affirmation, not a substantive legitimation, and the overall work supports this interpretation. In contrast, Young Posse's overall presentation is so opaque that authenticity arguments fail. Once the position of the premises becomes clear, the problematic nature is revealed unequivocally, precisely what is the case with Soju. Even when considering Soju in isolation, one could argue that it is a singular case, artistically suboptimal, but not entirely disastrous. The issue arises within the broader context of Young Posse. The group has 2 notably borderline songs. Macaroni Cheese is referenced in subsequent tracks, and the lyrical formulation mirrors the same problematic aspects present in Macaroni Cheese. The structure of the provocation thus becomes trivially recognizable. It is neither accidental nor incidental, but systematically orchestrated. Young Posse is intrinsically and systematically provocative, functioning as rage bait that persists across every EP. In doing so, the moral dimension is entirely disregarded. The immorality of the lyrics and performances remains consistently unexamined. The provocation is not limited to music or music videos, it extends to the political realm. Even a single performance in Moscow would be highly problematic in isolation, an absolute no-go during an ongoing war of aggression. The group's decision to wear outfits that can be interpreted as affirming the war-driving nation exacerbates the issue. Wearing camo clothing during a performance in Russia is utterly reprehensible.
Moreover, I consider it objectionable to perform in any country currently engaged in war or actively affirming war. This includes not only Russia, but also the USA and other nations.
Young Posse is being instrumentalized, and none of their EPs are free of problematic references. Already in their debut EP, as well as in the most recent release, songs appear that are highly controversial in terms of content. At its core, Young Posse exists to be intrinsically controversial and problematic, fueled by the company's ruthless, greedy drive. That there has been no backlash is due to the group's limited prominence. At the time of this script, they are still considered a new goo group. Not entirely irrelevant, but not well known enough for controversial rage bait to incur consequences. The Russia incident came to my attention purely by chance, when I saw a video on my YouTube homepage and couldn't believe that Young Posse had actually performed in Moscow. The company, or better formulated, the companies involved systematically integrate rage bait into their promotions. I am aware that we live in a world where progressive governments are nearly non-existent and their market freedoms enforcing oppression. Still, companies that do not occasionally take edgy risks or make mistakes, but rather structurally rely on controversy to generate attention, deserve more critical scrutiny. While my earlier videos focused on individual idols, the critique here targets a strategic corporate logic, a deliberate recurring staging of controversial behavior, not a mistake or accident, an intrinsic and systematic form of immorality.